So again, hello everyone and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Dylan Kassane. I'm a member of the marketing team here at Inova Software. And first of all, thanks for taking the time to attend our webinar this afternoon. I know that for many of you, it's a difficult time right now, and I hope that you and your families are making it through the pandemic period safely. Today's webinar is another in our regular series of webinars that gather the biopharma community together to exchange around best practices. To give an idea of who is joining us on the call today, we have just short of 150 people registered coming from all kinds of life science companies, from small biotechs to top 50 pharma companies, research institutes, and some government departments as well. And now on to today's webinar topic, alliance management, putting these best practices powered by technologies to drive successful relationships. Our guests on today's webinar are Ken Coppins and Bob Jones, respectively the CEO and COO and co-founders of Collabtogrow, a Boston-based alliance management consultancy. They're going to be joined by our own Shrestha, a senior solutions consultant at Inova. You'll see us all there on the videos at the top of the page. Now, just before we dive in, a few administrative logistics. We'll just go on to the next slide. Your microphone will be on mute during the presentation so that we can minimize the background noise. If you've got any questions during the presentation, please just type them into the chat window and we'll work through them as soon as we can at the end of the presentations. After the presentations, that's when we're going to be opening up for Q&A. We're going to be recording the webinar today. So if you have colleagues that couldn't attend, or if you want to watch it again later to refresh your memory, we're going to send you a link to the recording tomorrow as well. And at the end of the webinar, you'll also see a pop-up survey to complete to help us make sure we're providing you with the content that you need, and also a chance to let us know if you'd like to be a panelist on a future webinar. And so with that out of the way, I'm going to hand it over to Ken from Collabtogrow to get things started. Ken.
Thank you, Dylan, and welcome everybody. It's my pleasure to address you this morning. Bob and I are delighted to participate with you and the Inova team. And before we get started with the detailed presentation, I thought I might put some context around the topic of best practices and the importance of technology enablement. We started Collabtogrow, Bob and I did, over 3 years ago, after having both of us enjoying successful careers in management consulting, professional services, and for Bob, he had enjoyed some private industry as a CIO in a couple of places. Myself, for over 25 years, I had always some accountability for strategic alliances and partnerships. I had the opportunity to see firsthand some of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I experienced it and been part of it. Upon retiring as a global management consultant and professional services executive, I was encouraged by a number of my colleagues to think about and consider, starting a company that would provide services in the area of strategic alliances and collaborative relationships. So I took some time to ponder, reflect upon my experiences, and did some research before we started the company. And I wanted to share with you some of the things that really drove us to start the company. We saw that there were certain characteristics of alliance relationships that were clear in those that were successful, and when they weren't done in the way of certain practices, those relationships resulted in disappointments and in oftentimes outright failures. So we start with, today strategic alliances and other collaborative relationships are really gaining importance. They're critical to CEOs. They're critical to new businesses to drive revenue. Many of these CEOs today expect to drive over 40% of their annual revenues from these relationships. But yet, the alliance performance remains dismal. Well over 50% of the relationships failed to meet expectations. Some recent studies suggest that it might be greater than 50, it might be greater than 60%. So we need to make some improvements. We know that in the past, alliances were formed based on opportunities and oftentimes lack structure and were managed pretty casually. They lack vision, clear definition of goals, and accountability between the partners. Sometimes there's cultural misfits. Hence, the execution falters, and we shouldn't be surprised that that there's failures and missed expectations. Lastly, we've observed that there's a lack of enabling technologies to support some of the best practices. So Bob and I decided we'd form Collabtogrow because we felt we could make a difference. We were set out to help improve the performance of those alliances, and we wanted to help the clients achieve the meaningful and tangible results that they really are seeking. Today, as a consultancy, we continue to raise awareness, help educate, and help our clients get better results. We are focused specifically on improving the success rate and driving tangible results for our clients and their partners. Fortunately for us, as we started our business, ISO 44001, the Collaborative Business Relationship Framework, was released. Actually came from the UK. And we decided that as a consultancy, it'd be good to have a structure and a formalized methodology. So we embraced it. But as many of you know, ISO standards can be process heavy and sometimes burdensome and cumbersome to implement. So we used our own experience and knowledge, and we built a streamlined framework, very much aligned to the ISO standard. Our framework is what we believe to be the most meaningful, impactful elements, contain the most meaningful, impactful elements of the ISO framework. We established this framework that Bob will outline the key phases and most impactful elements for you in a moment. But before I do that, I just wanted to share a few overarching thoughts for alliance success that we'll discuss in more detail. One, alliances must be planned and well structured, and the partners must share a common vision, have clear measurable goals, be culturally synergistic, and each partner should be held accountable to each other. Alliances need a governance structure and require the active involvement, full commitment of a senior executive from each partner. We believe the alliance also must be managed in the same way that a major project or program is managed, disciplined execution. And lastly, there needs to be a single supporting technology platform to support the alliance management processes, best practices, and life cycle. I'd now like to turn the program to Bob and Shanker for a more in-depth and detailed discussion. Bob?
Great, thanks, Ken. You want to flip the slide, please? So, Ken talked about ISO and best practices, but one of the things that's been clear is that today's complex alliance management really requires an integrated technology solution. And just briefly, what are some of those requirements? One is, there needs to be a secure and shared place where the partners can kind of work, engage, and collaborate, right? Secondly, alliance management today is all about the value proposition. What is the characteristics of the alliance? And that value proposition, the creation of that needs to be supported by the technology. And additionally, it really has to be transparent and accessible by both partners so that they can kind of understand, all the stakeholders of the alliance can understand what that value proposition is. Ken mentioned, project management and program management is absolutely key for a successful alliance, and the technology underlying that alliance really needs to have some best practice project management disciplines built in. And then finally, there has to be the technology supporting alliance has to be a place that's trusted and where not only alliance team members but executives can feel comfortable about the transparency of what's going on in the alliance, both from reporting, dashboards, and the infamous quarterly business review, which I'll rant about later. You know, Ken and I, you know, we spend a lot of time with clients, and it's amazing how many clients are still trying to manage alliances with Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint slides, and sticky notes. And you know, to be honest, that's just not going to cut it anymore. Can you move to the next slide, please? So we also talked about underpinning that technology needs to be a level of best practices. And as Ken mentioned, we built a framework that leveraged a lot of the richness from ISO, complemented by our own real-world experience and know-how. And we built a framework that has 8 dimensions and 3 guiding principles. Don't want to spend a lot of time on each of the dimensions, but I do want to spend a bit of time on the guiding principles. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So we really, you know, think that there's 3 things that have to guide a successful alliance. So the first guiding principle is imagine, right? So it's really important that the partners can articulate and communicate, you know, the value prop. So imagine's all about the value proposition. So what is the strategy? What is the business case? And what are the key performance indicators that are going to be measured to determine whether or not the alliance is being successful? The second guiding principle is alignment. Not surprisingly, it's you know, once that the value proposition's been articulated, that really has to be formalized into agreements that both parties can see and agree to. There has to be an overall governance structure and models. And probably the most important part of alignment is to ensure that the appropriate level, and when I mean appropriate level, that generally that means the senior enough executives from both partners are not only engaged and committed to the alliance. And finally, you know, the last guiding principle is succeed. You'll probably hear us talk about this a lot. A strategic alliance at its core is a very large and complex program, and as Ken mentioned earlier, with a pretty high failure rate. And so to be successful, that whole succeed guiding principle means that you need to have rigorous operational execution. There needs to be insightful reporting and dashboards so that the alliance can course correct as needed. And finally, you know, these alliances are really long. And in fact, in life sciences, they're longer than even most commercial alliances. They tend to be many, many years. So over that course of time, there has to be a whole mentality about continuous improvement. So that's kind of, wanted to give you at least that basic framework of the guiding principles. But as we're going to talk about, we really want to have this conversation be both about best practices as well as the technology enablement. So I want to turn it over to Shanker a bit so he can set the foundation of the Inova partnering lifecycle. So Shanker.
Great, thanks Bob. And if we just go to the next slide, you know, first of all, you know, hello everyone, and thank you all for attending. I'm happy to join Ken and Bob to speak about alliance management best practices and how Inova solutions can help you enable and optimize your business process. So just a brief intro about who we are. As many of you already know, Inova provides end-to-end solution for partnering in life sciences. You know, from identifying a lead all the way to post-deal alliance management. And over the past 10+ years, we've worked closely with the industry to build solutions that support external innovation teams and BD teams in big pharma, small biotechs, and everything in between. We've translated the industry knowledge into intuitive and seamless technology platform that can take the stress away from, you know, managing critical activities around partnering interactions. Today, we'll focus, of course, on the last bubble you see here and how our tools can can help you efficiently manage your partnerships, how technology-enabled alliance management can help you implement the guiding principles that Bob referred to and is going to elaborate further. So take it away, Bob.
Yeah, great, thanks, Shanker. So the next, you can move to the next slide, please. So the next few slides, we're going to, Shanker and I are going to do a little tag team. I think it was described as Abbott and Costello, but I'm not sure I like that metaphor. But basically, we're going to drill a little bit more into the guiding principles. And then, Shanker's going to talk a little bit about how that guiding principle gets enabled within the Inova platform. Because again, at the end of today, what we're hoping you all get out of this webinar is the ability to take best practices and then get the tech enablement to really make those best practices real. So Imagine, as we talked about, Imagine's really about the articulation of the strategy, business case, goals, and KPIs. And so really the tool has to support the development as well as the communication of those goals and KPIs. And interestingly enough, and I'm sure you folks have lived it if you've all been in alliances, it's not surprising that oftentimes not only do the business goals not align between the two partners, but often they're in conflict with each other. So this whole Imagine phase and the ability to visualize that in a tech enablement tool is really critical to getting the alliance off to the right foot. So, Shanker?
All right, and of course, over the course of making a deal, you've collected lots of information and data points. Once a partnership is kicked off, it is critical to align all the stakeholders and precisely share the goals of this alliance. Inova can help create clear and concise executive reports that cuts through the noise and presents key information via one-page or slide decks like the one you see here. And as things evolve and major milestones are reached, key obligations come due, or the relationships may hit some issues, you can communicate all of this clearly to the team since you've captured everything in a singular platform like Inova. This is a pre-built solution, available out of the box, and you just need to adapt it to your needs. And of course, we'll help you do that as well. Next, Bob.
Great. Next slide, please. So the alignment guiding principle, of course, if once the business case and the value propositions been articulated in the Imagine phase, clearly need to align that, which is really just the formalization of the agreements and contracts. And I think everybody's kind of heard the anecdote of the two CEOs have a cocktail at a conference somewhere and say, hey, we should partner up, and they go tell their teams to go figure it out. So a lot of times the teams don't get a chance to figure out. Here's where you get your chance to figure it out, is in this alignment, is so, chance to make it right, make sure everybody understands it, make sure that it's articulated and communicated between the two partners.
All right, so proper information management is essential to that, to ensuring all sponsors in an alliance have clear view. It is critical to have a single source of truth and a central repository where everyone can access details of the partnership. So, deal history, meetings, key dates, territories, and manage documents pertaining to the agreements as well. So CDAs, contracts, amendments, reports, and so on. Inova provides full document management capability and the ability to share, notify, and set reminders on critical action items. We can seamlessly also bring in important meetings that you may have had at bio conferences. We have a connector to that. And we also integrate with your email system, so you can capture important communications with a click of a button. So there's a lot that we can do to help.
Great. This kind of the second key element of the Align guiding principle is governance. And so, clearly part of alignment is to establish the governance structure, whether it's a joint steering committee, whatever it might be, and then the processes and cadence to manage the relationship. And so, we talk about the high failure rates of alliances, and Ken referenced 50, 60, it's a lot, right? But it's really shouldn't come as a surprise, because statistically, alliances fail about the same as most major programs, which what tells you is that the whole governance part of strategic alliances is where a lot of the heavy lifting really has to occur, and it's really critical to have that tech enablement support of the whole governance model.
Yeah, I mean, setting up your governance structure and identifying key contacts and key stakeholders is another feature that Inova provides. You can set up roles and assign team members to appropriate committees, which can be done on an individual alliance basis. So you know exactly who is involved and easily communicate with them, pull them into meetings, assign them critical tasks, and so on.
Great. So now we get into the third guiding principle, which is succeed. And so there's a couple of key elements to it. Clearly, operations and reporting. Part of succeed is all about, execution, right? So the team has to keep focused on the objectives. They have to keep executing, keep the cadence between the partners together, and then be able to produce periodic reporting, ad hoc reporting dashboards, support for business reviews, etc. And so here's where I warned everybody earlier that I was going to go into a rant about QBRs, so I'm going to go into my rant about QBRs. Anybody who's out there that knows me can turn your mic off, because you've probably heard it a million times. But one of the things that the whole QBR process today in the non-tech enabled world is this whole thing of pitching together Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoint slides and sticky notes into the QBR deck, and then creating a fictional story to kind of tell execs every 3 months. And by the way, what exec is on a 3-month cadence for strategic business relations? So I think the whole idea of having a transparent and high fidelity reporting environment is just absolutely critical to the success of alliances. Thank you.
Right, and actually someone must have enjoyed your rant, because we had an extra voice of yours come through the mic. So
it was because I was standing up and yelling. Maybe that's why.
Yeah, I figured that the audio was definitely there. Right. So in order to execute, of course, you need to know what to execute on, right? So in order to ensure successful alliance, you must, of course, track and deliver on key milestones and activities. Inova provides capabilities to manage financial and non-financial obligations, send reminders to your finance teams on upcoming payments, and report on outcomes. So if you actually go to the next slide, we showed you a sneak peek of a one-pager executive report earlier, but Inova platform comes with full suite of reports that help you track your KPIs and perform analysis on various data points. For example, overall view of different deal types, tracking your obligations and due dates, and even forecasted versus actual payments. And as you, Bob, mentioned, having a central repository means high fidelity data, right? So it's a data that can be trusted. We also distribute these reports that provide insights and summaries to executive teams automatically to their inboxes, so they get timely updates and are aware of any issues or pending tasks, so they can be addressed. And finally, I think we'll have one more slide.
So the last part of succeed is really about continuous improvement. So again, alliances in general are long relationships. Even in the life sciences world, as you know, they're even longer than most in commercial alliances. It can be decades, but it's certainly years. So there has to be a way to kind of instantiate a continuous improvement model to learn from things and to continue to improve. And again, I think it's really important to have that whole continuous improvement, continuous learning model built into the technology that you're using to manage your alliances?
Yeah, I mean, once the alliance is rolling, it is important to ensure that it continues to evolve smoothly. You need to uphold the health of this strategic partnership, and that both teams are on the same page throughout. Inova provides a tool to run health checks and track responses from all team members to validate a shared vision, balance cultural fit on both sides, identify any issues, and see to it that they're addressed appropriately. And it can't be emphasized enough that even after a thorough diligence in life sciences to make sure that you're choosing the right partner, there's still many unforeseen pitfalls that present themselves during the life of a partnership. So you as an alliance manager must have the right tools to catch them early on and address them before it's too late. So we strongly believe that Inova can provide these solutions, and hopefully we were able to show that today. And I actually look forward to having a more in-depth discussion with many of you around this and how we can help.
Great. I think what we were going to do is have Ken give us a little wrap up. Ken?
Yep, next slide, please. Thank you. So in summary, right, alliances we have found, technology hasn't kept pace with the strategic importance of these alliances, the alliance management life cycle. It's, as Bob said, it's no longer possible really to keep pace by using PowerPoint, Excel. It just doesn't cut it, right? Alliances are managed by utilizing a set of disparate systems. And as Shanker points out, having a platform that can support, that's technology enabled and can support the best practice processes is where we need to be. So the enabling technology combined with industry best practices is going to help improve the success and improve the tangible outcomes that we all desire. We want you to remember the 3 guiding principles. Imagine what you can do as a partnership. Make sure you align that partnership with KPIs and the right governance model. And succeed is all about disciplined execution, right? The most important thing. These are programs. These are long-lasting relationships, especially in the life sciences space. And execution is key. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Dylan to foster some Q&A.
Well, thanks, Ken. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Shanker. I'm going to just turn over and try and run through some of the questions that have already been sent through the chat window. If you have got questions right now, I've got 5 questions there now. You can still submit them. We're just going to run through as many as we can in the time that we've got left here. But I want to start with one that's coming from Tianyu. Tianyu asks, where you're all talking, and Shankar and Bob were talking, especially at the end there, about cultural differences and conflicts between 2 different types of companies. Besides best practices, besides technology, how do you actually overcome these sorts of cultural differences? Where should we start? Maybe with you, Bob?
I was going to actually throw that one to Ken.
Or Ken?
Ken.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I'm happy to take that one. And look, the cultural differences, is an important ingredient, and it should be explored on the front end, in the due diligence process of whether or not 2 companies can work together. And particularly in our global world, we're dealing with geography. We're dealing with nationalities and ethnicity. We're dealing with companies that have organizational mismatches. One might be a very disciplined organization that may have particular procedures, have a very hierarchical relationship, and another partner may be much more casual and more collegial. But these differences, need to be explored up front, where possible, and at least determine whether or not the relationship, whether there can be compatibility. It's okay to have differences, but can you be successful with them? And you're going to have to work with them and communicate. And communicate is is absolutely key. So having, the kinds of processes that we talk about here, communication is key, execution is key, but, having the visibility, to move forward. There's a long history, well-known relationships in the partner world have turned out to be failures, where the cultural differences, probably most prevalent in the auto industry, where two organizations, particularly either a European or an American company trying to work with the Japanese, culturally very different. The U.S. and Germany, right? The Daimler Chrysler, right? Renault and Volvo. So there's AOL and Time Warner's legendary, where two cultures, one a conservative, very conservative, well-run company in Time Warner with an executive, an aggressive, newly found business in AOL, and they, we know what happened to the market in the .com bust. So I would just, go back and say, really need to be diligent on the front end and explore whether or not two companies can work together, and then at least identify those gaps in cultural differences and work at them. And it may be possible that you're not able to partner, at all. And so you need to learn the cultures of the organizations and whether or not you can work with them. And that, part of it's going to be difficult in this COVID world because, learning one's culture. I can remember, back 20 years ago, trying to work with an India offshore company, and very different cultures. And how do you learn about those cultures? You experience it. You sit across the table. You have dinner. You have meals with those people, and you kind of learn more about the culture. In this COVID world now, everything's remote. You don't get to feel and experience that culture. So. I think it's a great question, and one that is clearly a challenge, for alliances and partnerships. But, just say, again, do your due diligence on the front end, learn what those gaps are and work at them, and communication's key.
And if I can add just something small, some anecdotes that we've seen and heard, especially around life sciences partnerships. So you may be talking about a large pharma partnering with either a mid-size or small biotech. And even just that kind of a structure can bring misalignments and cultural issues in terms of just one with all of the resources in the world being able to be much more kind of hands-on and then do those things, whereas a smaller company may not be able to do that. So even some of those things, I think it's very important to keep in mind when you deal with a partner.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, talking about cultural fit being more than just, there's a cultural fit between countries, there's also the cultural fit between a huge pharma company and a small upstart biotech. And just talking of that, I'll go to a question from Arno, who said, it's great to hear about best practices and technology running smoothly, but have you got any examples where it didn't run smoothly? Can anyone tell us the other side, maybe?
The other side, there are many places where relationships fail, and they fail because one partner doesn't want to adhere to the discipline. You see it in some of there always seems to be a big guy and a little guy. And the big guy has their own structure, and the little guy may be much more casual. It may actually be more amenable to follow a best practice structure. So there are many relationships where, the sales forces don't work well together, right? That there's not able to build trust. One organization doesn't necessarily want to follow the discipline. They want to use their own systems and technology, and that that's across the board. Before any major company want to inject some new technology or a new process, it becomes quite burdensome, and it just happens. And that's why I think, again, you got to go to the due diligence and try to get a commitment from the partners, to share the common platform, to follow the same practices and processes, because I think there are more disappointments than there are successes oftentimes.
Bob, I'm going to shoot this next one to you. From the talk you were giving, you talked about 3 elements: imagine, align, and succeed. And the question is simply from Zai, which one is more important? Are you able to give us a favorite? Is it more important to align than to imagine? Is there one that holds more weight when it comes to that alliance?
Unfortunately, no. There isn't one. I mean, you couldn't do one with all 3 because they really go hand in hand. No, I guess clearly the most important one is the first one, because if you don't, imagine and create the value proposition, then obviously it's pretty hard to align and then succeed. But they really do go hand in hand. And I get this question asked a lot, especially when it comes to small companies versus large companies. Well, gee, I'm a smaller company. Can I skip one? And that answer is also, unfortunately, no. But I do think the best practices can scale appropriately for a smaller company or a larger company. So for example, a smaller company, especially if it's 2 small companies have an alliance, the business case can be a light version, right? I mean, as long as it's articulated well. Perhaps they don't have as many KPIs in a smaller relationship. And maybe the governance models are simpler, right? They're single decision makers versus steering committees, et cetera, that you might find in a larger relationship. But the three things really do go hand in hand. You really have to understand what the value prop is. You have to have the partners align on that value prop, and then, as we talked about a lot today, these programs are really difficult to manage, like all big complex programs. So you have to execute. So you have to have this succeed. So the short answer is you can't skip one.
Shanker, I'm going to send this one to you. It seems like a really practical question from Aurelie. Aurelie just wants to know, how does it work for migrating data from Excel into a tool like Inova?
Oh, there are multiple ways. We've got migration tools for any kind of complex data migration from, let's say you have legacy systems or other third-party systems. But if you're specifically talking about Excel, we have Excel import tools in the platform that allows you to easily, kind of map the fields that you want to import, and then just run through the import tool. Happy to kind of go into the more detailed training, or if you want to see it, we can obviously show you that as well.
Okay, and I've got another question I'll just send to you, Shanker. This is from Mike. Mike says, we subscribe to Inova as a CRM of our partnering activities, but not for alliance management. Obviously Inova was there in all of these different stages of the partnering program, but is it possible to start somewhere and then expand into AM, or should Mike have thought of that before he jumped in and bought Inova the first time?
No, of course. It's the whole platform is available to most of our clients, unless you have explicitly turned it off. I'm going to say most likely it's just been hiding in the background, and we can enable it, and we can also kind of just take your existing modules that you're using for, let's say, for scouting and BD and transactions and due diligence and so on, and just add the last bubble that you saw, which is alliance management. So it's very easy to turn it on. Again, it's just hiding in the background. We can it's very seamless, and should be very easy to do for the most part. Of course, that it requires a bit of a requirements gathering on our side to make sure that you have all the pieces needed to do so, but we should be able to do that for you easily.
Okay, and I guess so, Mike, we're going to reach out. We'll reach out and we'll talk. And a question then from Livia. Is Inova software actually implemented for AM in any company? And I guess the answer is yes.
Yeah, lots of them, yes. For alliance management, yes, we have lots of companies, as Mike alluded to, who have the full suite, but may not be using the AMPs. Others are using alliance management exclusively, and of course, many of it makes sense that you would use it end to end. And I would say in most cases, it's the full suite where you start from your initial discussion at a conference all the way to alliance post-deal alliance management.
Great. Bob, maybe we'll send this one back to you. You talked about governance, and I guess, Ken, you talked about governance there at the start as well. Is there a best practice governance structure, or does ISO say anything about a governance structure that would work particularly well for life sciences? That's from Paul.
Yeah, ISO is not completely prescriptive in terms of a governance structure. Again, they do focus on the term SER, which is Senior Engagement Responsible. So they really believe that's important. We embrace that as well. So probably the most important thing is to establish from both partners who that senior executive responsible is, and that they're at the appropriate level. Most large alliances, that should be somebody pretty high up, executive, perhaps even a C-suite executive, that has the kind of championship of the alliance, but also senior enough to make stuff happen. Beyond that, I mean, I think again, we talked a little bit about, I think it might scale by size of the company, but like most programs, the governance model probably has some steering committees and maybe even some stakeholder working committees. They would have regular cadence set up for status calls, and so the governance model would not look much different than in any other large program that you might have been involved with, other than the topic at hand is the alliance versus maybe something else that the program might be. So there is a lot of best practices that you could leverage out of the traditional program management world for governance. I think the most important thing that ISO presses is the SER role from both partners.
I would just add to Bob's comment. Look, ISO doesn't do much in the way of anything industry specific. We've done our own interpretations of some of the complexity of ISO, and it built we have a generic organizational model that we've used with clients that we'd be happy to share. And as Bob pointed out, it's there's a lot of it that's pretty similar to a very large program or whatnot. It's got steering committees, it's got different reporting. It's got participation from the partners and it aligns. So we'd be happy to share that with anybody who's interested. It's a pretty basic model, but have to be adapted to the specific situation.
One of the things that strikes me there when you're both talking about this governance structure is the senior management has to be involved in that vertical integration in the company there. But what about horizontally? How much of a role in the alliance management is being played by other silos within the pharma industry? The BD and the S&E, how are they building into this alliance that's going to last for so many years?
Want me to take that, Bob? I think they all have a role, particularly as you get towards commercialization, right? You have you're going to be commercializing and selling your product. You got R&D, you got new product, coming. That there's, again, based on the situation, that there's going to be, functional participation, right? You might even have, HR. So you've got R&D, and your whole discovery elements. You've got your marketing, right? Is what message and branding. But they're all going to have a role as you start to work together collaboratively. Each of those functional organizations, may have a face-off and a touch point with your partner. So it's important that they may have tasks or activities throughout the at various stages throughout the life cycle of the alliance, and in pharma specifically, these are 5-10 year relationships. So, the functional capabilities are going to come in at various times. Again, more important to manage it more like a program, right? It's, when is it time for, a particular, function to get involved in the relationship, right? So if you have a good plan and a good structure and you're continuing to update, your project or program or your alliance plan, then I think you got, that you're planned for it accordingly, and you can involve those resources when they need to be.
Yeah, and just to add some examples again that we've heard, one of the things, especially if you have distinct BD and alliance management, functional areas or organizations, that's there's always a question on when does alliance management get involved in a deal, right? How do we transition seamlessly, once you start to negotiate and to start talking about term sheets? How do we translate that and transfer that information properly? When if you have a system, no matter what you're using, how do you communicate the data points that need to be shared properly? So there's a lot of that as well that you should be aware of. And again, hopefully having a central, place where you're capturing all of that information, it makes it really easy to just add on the next team member that needs to be involved, and share and, give access to all of the documentation, all of the details around a deal as much as you can share. Again, not everything is relevant to alliance management and not everything can be shared, but but it makes it really easy to then share when you do need to do so.
Shanker, we've got another technical question that I'm going to throw your way. How does Inova interact with systems like SAP and Enterprise Performance Management System? Does it integrate? Does it replace? Or is it something separate?
We integrate. So we have integrated with SAP's SAP systems and Oracle financials. So you don't need to go too much into kind of complex integrations, we would say. It's basically tracking, obviously, that your obligations have been executed, so, to know that the finance teams are aware of upcoming obligations and due dates and so on. So we have APIs, just like many platforms out there, that allows you to communicate with any external system and third-party systems that allows it to talk to it as well. So yes, we have done it. We can do it. And it's just a custom integration that we would have to do depending on what system that you have.
Okay. Another question here, and I'm not sure exactly who to direct this one to, but the situation is this, as described. One of the issues we have is even when AM tries to get involved with deals, by the time it gets to AM, there are details missing. They never have all the information. And we want to manage the alliance perfectly, but we don't have the information to do that. Is this something you see often, Bob?
Yeah, I guess it gets back to, how well the align phase occurred. It seems to me as if that's where all the kind of details are worked out. Or if we're talking about something more specific, in ongoing execution, again, it's about program management. So is there some set of activities that alliance management isn't aware of? They should be. They need to put them into the alliance management kind of space and manage to those and figure out if there's action items, if there's risks, issues, etc. So, it kind of depends situationally what information is missing, but following kind of the imagine, align, succeed model, hopefully you don't have a lot of missing information. It should be all there, and it should be in the platform, again, at the appropriate level where folks can go see it.
And I guess we're kind of, sorry, go ahead, Bob.
No, I was just going to say, obviously if that person with that question would like to talk at a more specific level, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, we have heard kind of, if you want to call them complaints, or just the fact that the things aren't always aligned, and I don't think it's always because it's intentional. It's just because, again, you're lacking that process, or you're lacking a methodology to actually pass on the right information, or if a lot of times there's certain data that's considered, especially in a BD transaction, that's considered sensitive and confidential, and no one's quite sure what the organizational, compliance rules are with respect to sharing some of this information if you've gotten, information from data rooms and so on. So yeah, again, being aligned is obviously very, very important, and also just understanding how you can put in access control rules. I mean, a lot of times people talk about these shared drives or just emails. Those are dangerous, and I think people tend to be more careful with that. So instead of just forwarding you an email, which obviously could lead to a lot of bad things, there needs to be a right way of sharing that information. And I think, again, a lot of times it's not intentional. It's just that there are rules behind how to share information, and there's not a proper way of doing it. So hopefully having a tool, can help you do that.
Okay, I have a question from Chowfei, who says, you're talking about AM teams. At my company, I am AM. It's a small company. How can I bring on these best practices when it's just me?
Yeah, I think.
Who wants to go? Go to you, Bob.
Yeah, I tried to. I think I tried to cover a little bit earlier. I mean, imagine a line succeed. Those best practices, those guiding principles are not. They can scale. I mean, if you are alliance management, there's no reason why you can't still, work with your alliance management partner. If that's also a one person on the other side of the table, to work through, what is the value proposition of the alliance, document those things, document that that value proposition in the alignment phase, and then execute against that. So I think it does scale. It's just a matter of those things have to be done regardless of the size of the alliance, because you can't really be successful if you haven't got to the point where everybody knows what the purpose of the alliance is, and everybody's actually aligned on the goals of the alliance. So it's kind of Alliance 101, and I think as an individual it might even be easier to do because you at least have control of it.
And I would say it's probably even more critical, because what that means is, when you're a one-man team or a two-man, when the teams are very small, there's no one to kind of catch it when something falls through, right? It becomes even more critical that you've got these you've got these processes in place, so that again, you're wearing multiple hats. You're doing your day job is everything. So in that case, it's even more critical to have some kind of a sanity check throughout your alliance management process. So when things are coming due, you're being automatically notified of things, right? You don't have to again look through your inbox for history on things, and then what to do next. You don't have to kind of go crazy with your calendar, your Outlook calendar, trying to set up meetings and all that. So yeah, I think it becomes actually even more critical that you follow the best practices, when you are a smaller team.
Right. I've got one question here, and I think it might be one of our last questions, and I apologize to Patrick for holding it over. He sent it in a little more than half an hour ago, and he probably thinks I didn't see it, but I did see it. But I think it is a nice note to push towards the end. Besides watching this webinar over and over again, or contacting Collabtogrow, are there some resources that you can recommend where people can go to, improve their knowledge of alliance management?
Well, I guess one would be, there's a number of places. One would be to the Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals, and they have a whole library of content, and they conduct periodic webinars and the like. That would be one place. You could also use them to gain a copy of the ISO 44001 framework. It is a long read and it's a bit complex, but I think those are two good places. Certainly the community of the Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals, they hold a variety of summits. They have one particular summit for the biotechnology life sciences industry. It's generally in early fall. And, due to COVID this year, it went totally virtual. But I'd suggest those are the two places I would start.
And specifically with us, we have some white papers as well that we'd be happy to share. Obviously it deals with certain way that we've learned from the industry. So we do have some as well.
That's great. Look, I want to thank everybody there. As you can see, we're coming up towards time. So I really want to just take this opportunity to thank Ken and Bob from Collabtogrow, and of course Shanker from here at Inova as well. A couple of final notes for everyone. If you keep your eye on your email inbox tomorrow, you'll receive a link to review the video of the webinar. You can share the link, share your link with a colleague, share your link with anyone else who might be interested but who was maybe unable to join us here today. As well, please don't forget the survey that's going to pop up just when you exit the call. Your feedback is really valuable, and if you'd like to participate as a panelist on a future webinar, you can let us know that on the survey as well. Please keep your eyes open as well for Inova's series of co-sponsored events with Bio. Virtual partnering event in the neurosciences is coming up at the start of November, and we have a virtual partnering event for infectious diseases coming up in December. And of course, keep your eye on your email box as well. We have webinars coming up regularly, including some very interesting webinars around deal making, partnering, and one of the bigger deals to have gone through a little bit earlier this year that we're going to take you behind the scenes in our next webinar. And with that, we're done. So thank you to everyone for jumping on the call today. Please do stay safe and well. Thanks for joining Inova. Keep your eye on your email box. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.